Hey guys, PK here. Sorry about the mic quality. First of all, I don't have access to my regular mic right now. Also, I'm a little sick, so please bear with me. Anyway, today we've got something big on our plate. As some of you may know, a Nintendo Direct dropped earlier this week and gave us a boatload of info on Fire Emblem Three Houses. After a dry spell of no announcements about it since E3, any info Nintendo could give us would be a godsend. And boy howdy, they gave us a lot. So, let's dive right in, shall we? Special shout out goes out to Samuel Cron, who's been helping me formulating speculations and comparisons between the E3 trailer and the Direct trailer that came out on Wednesday. So, one thing to notice right off the bat is that the world map is a little different from the E3 trailer. Spellings of nations' names have been changed. Nothing too special here, it probably just means they have more finalized names of the nations of our continent. Speaking of which, we've got a name for it. Fodlan. Knowing how much Fire Emblem loves to make references to different mythologies, I tried to see if there was a reference to anything, but I couldn't find anything. If anyone has any leads on that, let me know in the comments section. Anyway, we've got our three major regions: the Adrustian Empire to the south, home of the lovely future Empress Edelgard; the Holy Kingdom of Fargus in the frigid Northlands, home of the possibly uptight prick of a prince, Dimitri; and the Leicester Alliance to the east, home of the handsome heir Claude. Beyond the three nations, there are also other nations outside of Fodlan as well. Will these nations be a source of conflict? Who knows? Anyway, back to Fodlan. Each nation here feels different right off the bat with their different forms of government and varying terrain. What I'm hoping for is that they go more in depth with this. What's each nation's culture like? How does this affect their citizens' worldviews? How are these people's ideals reflected in the students from each of these nations? There's a lot of world-building potential here, and I'm looking forward to it. Speaking of culture, there seems to be a big emphasis on the religious aspects of it. We've got the Church of Seiros, named after Seiros, who was mentioned in the E3 trailer. Seiros was given a gift from the goddess, but we'll get more into that later. The Church of Seiros has the Knights of Seiros, who are tasked to keep the peace within Fodlan. However, there's potential for conflict here. With Edelgard's "the crests are to blame" speech in the E3 trailer, one can logically conclude that a religious conflict will come up in the game and will most likely be the major conflict. Hell, there might even be corruption within the Church of Seiros in relation to the crests. It is worth pointing out that we may be going up against church soldiers at some point, so religious conflict is a big possibility here. Also, towards the end of the Direct trailer, we can see the Black Beast has a crest stone of Gautier as its weapon. The crests could be a source of power for this monster. We'll just have to see how powerful these crests could be. Moving right along, we've got our player character Byleth. And hey, no amnesia and no relation to royalty. That's a good start. Instead, we play as the child of a mercenary group leader, like Ike from the Tellius games. Rip our dad, I guess. More on that later. There doesn't seem to be any form of character customization other than choosing our gender, and, wow. There's, a big difference in appearance. A big difference. Anyway, we're the new teacher at the Officers' Academy in the heart of Fodlan, and we've got to choose which house we're going to teach for. With 3 different houses to choose from, there's a potential for replayability here. The potential doesn't stop there, but we'll get to that later. I'm personally going for Edelgard first. Just look at her! She's so pretty! I love her! I wanna fun! Anyway, as the new teacher at the Academy, you're assigned to teach your students in the art of combat. I gotta admit, being in charge of a bunch of teenagers awakens a strong maternal instinct within me. I feel more compelled to look out for these kids and make sure they all stay alive. They're more than just my army, they're my children. I gotta protect them, teach them, raise them, feed them, change their diapers. Anyway, your students can be trained in your typical Fire Emblem weaponry: swords, lances, axes, magic, bows, as well as a new weapon, gauntlets. In addition to that, each student seems to be in charge of their own battalion, which can consist of different movement types: infantry, armor, horseback, and flying. These battalions look very Advance Wars-esque. Nice touch. Speaking of battalions, there's also a new stat present: Authority. Could this be the return of Authority stars? Will this affect how units can lead their battalions? I'd say that's possible. Look here. That Triforce-like symbol seems to indicate battalion formation. Notice how Bernadette is in front, while her battalion is sectioned off into 2 groups behind her, similar to how the symbol next to her HP bar is formed. This may be a starter formation, since everyone in this scene has the same Triforce symbol next to them, and this looks like it could be a map in the early game. In the E3 trailer, we can see Dimitri and his battalion get into a single triangle formation before rushing into battle. And later in the same trailer, Claude's battalion looks to be in a horizontal line formation. Authority may grant units access to different formations. Another thing to point out is that Gambit seems to replace or be a renamed version of Formation from the E3 trailer. Formation may be related to Gambit boosts and supports, but in what way is not made clear right now. Anyway, more about battle mechanics. Skills are making a return as they can clearly be seen right above a unit's name before attacking an enemy. This was also seen in the E3 trailer with Edelgard where it looks like she has Vantage, and with Byleth where it looks like he has Wrath. Combat arts from Echoes also seems to be making a return, as seen with Bernadetta and her Ironbone combat art, Curved Shot. Notice the number next Curved Shot. This could indicate the number of uses that the combat art has per map. Also notice that Bernadetta can potentially use bows and lances. It seems as though students are able to wield 2 types of weapons at the start. Speaking of weapons, as the student's teacher, it's your job to plan out lessons and tutor your students individually to raise their weapon proficiency. You can choose which weapons the students can train in and set goals for them to work towards. In terms of weapons, there's a few interesting things to note here. 1. There's 2 types of magic associated with the Reason stat, Dark and Anima, and Light seems to be associated with Faith. Notice how there's no staff-related stats. That's because light magic will be our healing magic in this game. See how Linhardt is healing Byleth with a heal tome here. 2. The new weapon type Gauntlet seems to have a brave weapon characteristic and possibly a higher crit rate as seen here. The crit rate might just be due to Casper's class, but it's hard to say for now. In terms of weapon triangle, Gauntlets may be a neutral weapon, but that's pure speculation at the moment. Related to lesson plans, there also seems to be a mood meter mechanic in place as well. This may affect how often you can have one-on-one tutoring session with your students, and may affect their experience gains. It may be similar to FE5's fatigue meter. If a student's mood is too low, they may not be able to participate in battle or gain as much experience from lessons. Of course, that's pure speculation. Another thing to note is that after a tutoring session, a student's affection for you increases. We'll talk more about supports and the like later. Let's move on to classes. Your students seem to start off with the Noble class, as seen here with Linhardt. The Noble class seems to function similarly to the Villager class in Gaiden and Echoes, where they can promote into any other base class. To get into a different class, students will have to take a class certification exam. Here we can see the player choosing a class certification exam for Edelgard to take. The classes listed are Mercenary, Thief, Knight, Cavalier, Brigand, Archer, Mage, and Priest. Note that all of these were base classes in previous Fire Emblem games. This opens up possibilities for a reclassing system and possibly some changes to how promotion works. Along with a list of classes, there's a list of exam contents to the right, which lists skills that are needed to pass, as well as required items needed to take the exam. A pass rate is also listed, which implies that there are some exams that are harder to pass than others. These more difficult exams may be promoted class exams, such as for a Paladin or a General. Remember how I said there seem to be required items for certification exams? Looks like one way to earn them is through arena-like battles as seen here. The Intermediate Seal is a reward for winning this round, and the Intermediate Seal is a required item for the Brigand certification exam. Gold can also be earned for winning these battles, so they may function like the arena from FE4, but again, pure speculation. This seems to be a way for your units to train in a safe environment without the risk of dying. Notice how both of these students have training weapons. It seems as though you'll be pitting your students against students from different houses as well. Ferdinand is from the Adrestian Empire, as seen in Edelgard's introduction and in this scene. Notice how Sylvain is nowhere to be seen. Alright, let's move on to supports. With these kids being students and you being their teacher, there's no chance of us getting an S support or child units with any of them. Yep. No chance. At all. Japan, don't you fucking dare make this weird. Support conversations don't seem to go in depth as they did with most games in the franchise. We could see the return of Tellius-like supports. Supports also seem to tie in with Gambit boosts. It seems like if you're in close range of allies you have a high support with, you can activate a Gambit boost, which seems reminiscent of a triangle attack from previous installments. Alright, we got most of the gameplay out of the way, let's move on to story, major plot points, and characters. We've already covered how religion will most likely play into this, so let's go over the elephant in the room. Or should I say the divine dragon in the room. Here, we have Sothis, a mysterious young girl who is most likely a dragon, who suddenly appears in our mind and will be a guide of sorts, as she puts it. As for who Sothis actually is, there's a few things to point out. 1, her headpiece looks similar to the headpiece the goddess wears, so there's a high chance that she and her are related in some way. It's possible Sothis is the goddess's voice, much like how Tiki was the voice of Naga. 2, Sothis' name is similar to Seiros's. There is a possibility that those two are related as well. Hell, they might even be the same person. Speaking of Seiros, let's talk about Seiros's sword. Throughout both the E3 trailer and the direct trailer, there are different people in possession of the sword. We've got Seiros herself, the goddess, a possible antagonist, and Byleth. It's possible that it was the goddess's sword at first, and it was passed on to Seiros. As for how it got into Byleth and in the antagonist's hands remains to be seen. Another interesting point is that Byleth is surrounded by a dark energy while wielding said sword. Is the sword a source of good or evil? Who knows? Are the crests to blame for the corruption of the sword? That's probably the case. Remember earlier how the Black Beast was wielding a crest? The crest may have turned the good sword into a bad sword. Speaking of corruption, let's talk about our father, Captain Geralt. With our player character being the child of a mercenary group leader, it's no surprise that people are already noticing parallels between Ike and Byleth. So it's highly likely that, spoilers for people who haven't played the Tellius games, Byleth's father will die like Ike's. But by whose hand? Well, it might be ours. Let's take a look at the end cinematic of the direct trailer. That pale-faced man looks very similar to Geralt. The hair, the facial structure, it just looks too similar. Granted, it's hard to compare them at these angles, but it might be worth noting. Assuming our father will get corrupted by an evil entity, perhaps the crests are to blame? Anyway, early on in the direct trailer, the narrator mentions there's a mysterious power within us, so this is most likely related to that power. This power may be related to the gift of the goddess that was given to Seiros. It could be the power of foresight, like what the Apostles of Banyan had in the Tellius games, or the power to turn back time, a sort of in-story Millas turn wheel. If we take a look at the last cinematic of the direct trailer, we can see the bandit Kostas driving his axe into Byleth's back with a negative filter over the scene. From here, it looks as if time is flowing backwards to the point before impact. Then the scene plays out normally, this time with Kostas going in for the hit, but with Byleth successfully retaliating. There may be some loose evidence for Millas' turnwheel theory. Edelgard has some pretty ominous dialogue at the end of the E3 trailer. It almost sounds like she's coming from a bad future and sending out the player back in time to set things right. Another point I want to talk about is the game's canonical route. It's obvious from the trailers that Canon Byleth is a dude, and he chooses to teach for the Black Eagle House. Given most of his interactions are with Edelgard, and that he's teaching Adrestrian students, there should be no surprise. What I'm afraid of is that the other routes will not get as much story depth as the Adrestrian route when chosen. The FE writing team has done this before in regard to throwing away potential character development and story elements in favor of canon. Samia supports! However, with the amount of world building they've done for each nation, that may not be the case, but I'm gonna remain skeptical. Alright, time to get to my final point and the controversial opinion you probably clicked on this video for. Is this Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE with more emphasis on the FE? By the time you see this video, you probably have heard people say this is the most anime Fire Emblem has ever been. And what's the most anime crossover the Fire Emblem franchise has ever done? Yup, it's Tokyo Mirage Sessions, the Fire Emblem Shin Megami Tensei crossover game for the Wii U. Now, keep in mind, I've never played TMS, but I might stream it one day on the channel because I like FE and SMT. But from what I've gathered, the game seems to be more like an SMT game with some Fire Emblems sprinkled in. Granted, it was developed by Atlus, the developers of the SMT games, but let's not get into the can of worms here. Three Houses, on the other hand, seems to be a Fire Emblem game with some SMT sprinkled in, if only because of the school setting. So, would I call this another TMS? Not exactly. The high school setting is such a common trope for anime that you could slap on any anime to this crossover label and it would still be valid. But I can admit the art style and the animated cutscenes are reminiscent of the Persona series, so maybe I'm not too far off. Thanks for watching, everyone. Got questions, comments, general hate for bringing up Tokyo Mirage Sessions? Leave a comment below! And if you want to see more content from me, subscribe. I'm uploading a backlog of Fire Emblem Heroes videos featuring my Thief team taking on Bound Hero battles and Grand Hero battles. And I'm currently playing through Fire Emblem, a Fire Emblem fan game we made in RPG Maker. Bye everyone, see you all in the next video.